Hi everyone, welcome back to another video in our PyCharm series for GIS 540. We've already taken a look at how to run scripts and set up the PyCharm IDE to help us with our geospatial programming projects. In this video, we're going to take a look at what debugging looks like in PyCharm and how it can be used to help us make corrections and adjustments to our scripts. PyCharm makes debugging pretty easy to do. I'm going to demonstrate just enough to get you started, and you should do some exploration on your own until you're comfortable using these tools with your projects. So here we have a PyCharm project called debugging. In it, I have one script called list field props, which gets a dataset from the user and lists some properties for each field in the dataset using the list fields function. I've already set up my run debug configuration, which is called list fire fields, because I want to work with a fire shapefile. This is working code, but we're going to imagine that it needs some improvement. Either we're getting errors, or we just want to get a better understanding of how the code is handling input. We're going to run the code in the debugger, which gives us more control over the run process and some tools to inspect what's going on behind the scenes. To start running the code in the debugger, simply click the bug icon instead of the run icon. Now, when you do, your code is going to start to run until it finishes or throws an exception. As I mentioned, we're going to imagine we're having little trouble with this code and we want to walk through it section by section or line by line. We'll need to set a breakpoint on a line of interest before we can start stepping through. So let's set a breakpoint here on line 8 by simply left-clicking in the gutter. When the debugger runs, it will stop just before running this line. I'm going to go ahead and set another breakpoint on line 10 so that we have a second section of code we can run as a single chunk. Now let's go ahead and connect to the debugger and start running. After a couple seconds, at least on my machine, PyCharm will automatically connect to the debugger and open the debugger window. At first glance, there seems to be a lot going on down here. We're going to take a look and break it down piece by piece. First, in the debugger window itself, we have another console tab, which typically will just function to show the program output. So you can refer to the console tab of the debugger window, or if you've run the script already, you can hop back over to the run window to check your output. We also have several different types of step buttons here at the top, which we'll discuss more later. On the left, we have some run and breakpoint buttons. And in the center, we have 3 panes for frames, variables, and watches. We'll mostly be looking at variables and watches, but we'll also see how the frames pane functions later. So let's take a look at what the debugger has already done in the variables pane. Again, we've run the script up to the breakpoint on line 8. In the variables pane, PyCharm has created a line for the variable myData. We've defined that variable in our script, and the debugger is automatically reporting the field type and value. In this case, we can see that the variable myData is a string, and the value is a shapefile on our C drive. As we debug through the script, this pane will automatically update with new variables as they are defined, and it will report new values for existing variables as their values change. To show that, we're going to resume running the program. This will automatically run to the next breakpoint on line 10 and stop before running that line. To run to the next breakpoint, use the Resume Program button in the debugger. As you can see, we now have another variable, fields, in the variables pane. Once again, we have the field type, in this case list, and we can already see the length of the list, which is 74. We also have the value, which is a series of field objects. Notice that for this variable, because it's a list type, we can continue to drill down into its value by expanding from the arrow on the left. I can now see the index position of all the values in the fields list. If I expand into one of these field objects, say index position 0, I can see values for all of the properties associated with that object. This can be very helpful when working with complex packages like ArcPy, because it allows us to see all of the potential properties we might want to work with without unfocusing our IDE. Notice that I can now already tell the name property of the field in index position 0 in my fields list. In this case, it's FID. If I expand the properties of the next field in the list, I can tell that its name is shape. I encourage you to explore the variables pane functionality a little bit more because, as I mentioned, it can be very helpful. Let's go back to our script now. We've run our script to the second breakpoint, and it's about to enter into a loop. We might be interested at this point in how certain variables change within the loop, so let's run our script line by line instead of in chunks using breakpoints. We can do that using the step tools, which I mentioned earlier. We have 6 different options for stepping through code. I encourage you to experiment with all of those because they can take some time to get a hang of. For now, I want to introduce you to just a couple. To move straight through your code line by line, we can use the Step Over button. Let's keep an eye on the new variable f. Notice that when we progress through the loop, the Step button follows the flow of our script, and we return to line 10 after passing through line 11. Also look how the value for f continues to update as we pass through line 10 each time through the loop. You might notice as we go that we're not seeing the current values for the name, editable, and precision properties that we want to track in our script. If I want to keep track of any of the values not already shown in the variables pane, I can do that using the watch window. There are a couple ways to add items to the watch window. I can click the plus icon and type in the item I want to watch, or I can find the item in the variables pane, right-click it, and select Add to Watches. These values will update in the watch pane just like variable values in the variable pane. To show you some of the other stepping tools, I'm going to restart the debugger from the beginning of the code by clicking the Stop button in the top right and reconnecting to the debugger. I have a breakpoint on line 8, so my code will run through line 7. Now, instead of stepping over line 8, I'm going to step into it. Stepping into follows the code down deeper into every module, class, or function that is referenced. If I step into this line, a new tab opens, and we can see that some code that normally just hangs out in the background. This may be useful when you're working with modules like ArcPy, because this level includes a lot of documentation. Stepping into code is also useful when you've defined your own modules, classes, or functions, and you want to follow the whole process and flow of your code as those modules, classes, and functions are employed. Notice that on this level, we have another frame because we are outside of our main thread. We also have new variables that are associated with this thread. But we can still reference the variables in our main thread at the same time. Okay, to get back to our script, we can step in the opposite direction, which is out. Notice that we're back up to the main thread now, which is the script we're debugging. Before sending you off on your own to explore the debugger more, I want to show you one more time how we disconnect. If you want to run your code straight through to exit the debugger, mute breakpoints and resume program. If you want to disconnect from the debugger entirely, you can always hit the stop button. I hope you take some time to explore the PyCharm debugger on your own. Becoming proficient with the debugger will make you a much more efficient programmer and save you lots of headaches as you work on your projects.